this life is old, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. Hey, I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Some bright morning when this life is old, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away, hey, I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Welcome to Out of the Blue number 417. So I'm out here in the woodshed, otherwise known as the garage, with my friend up here, Mr. Garage Door Opener. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Neo-Swedenborgianism. Neo-Swedenborgianism is a philosophy, a worldview. It's a way of seeing things, which is my own creation. I am the progenitor of Neo-Swedenborgianism. And a good way to begin on the subject is to talk about the near-death experience, because in the news often nowadays we have this thing called the near-death experience. And to look at the near-death experience neo-Swedenborgianistically is to see it as something that is only happening in the person's head. Now, this is not to say definitively that it is only happening in their head. This is a way of thinking where if you say, well, if it's only happening in their head, well, I should say, let me backtrack. Some people say it's only happening in their head. So the person who has the near-death experience, you might have heard about it, their heart stops for some reason, they float above their body, they see a tunnel of light, they go down the tunnel of light to a city of light or a place full of light, and they're met by their deceased relatives and loved ones, sometimes even their dog, and they come back with no fear of death. They say it was the most wonderful thing. The light itself had a loving quality to it. And they are convinced, the person who experienced it is convinced it was absolutely real, even more real than this world we're in now. And so the person who has experienced it often has this attitude that this world is just somewhere we are temporarily until we go to our true home, which is that other world that they saw. So, but we, Neo-Swedenborgians, are speaking about it from a place of having not experienced it. Okay, so I haven't experienced it. And one contention some people will say to this whole thing, they'll say, well, it's only in your head. It's all in your head. It's all just in your head. And so that's where we start. Because the point of all this is, if it's only in your head, then that's what we're talking about. If it's only in your head, because in the 1700s, there was a guy named Swedenborg who also wrote similar things. He wrote about a similar place. He wrote about it similarly. It affected his life in similar ways. And while I was reading that, I had an insight, because he lived in Sweden in the 1700s, and his heavenly world resembled the world he was in. Okay, it didn't have any skyscrapers. It didn't have any insights of the future. It also only had, in his day, they didn't have the telescopes we have today, and so they only knew about a few of the planets. And in his world, he described, there were only those planets. There weren't any more planets that we now know about. And so that supports the idea that this is that it was only in his head. So I was reading Swedenborg, and I had this idea, well, it's all in his head. It's just he's traveling in his own psyche or subconscious. But the thing is, if it's only in his head, and if the near-death experience is only in a person's head, then it becomes physiological, which is to say, it becomes a part of how the body works. And if it's physiology, well, then it can be studied scientifically. It can be studied rationally. It's a part of how the body works. It becomes a subset of biology. So you have biology, which is a science. You have human biology, which is a subset of biology. You have human anatomy, human physiology, neurobiology, which is how your brain works, and all this stuff. So it becomes a subject which is a valid scientific study. Now, but I am not definitively saying it is only in your head. I am saying, as a working proposition, if we say if it is only in your head, then it becomes this subject that we can study without any religious connotations or without any religious faith or belief. And because we can study it without any religious faith or belief, we can bring together people whose actual religion, their faith and belief, conflict. Okay, so you could have an atheist who doesn't believe in any actual afterlife or any actual God, and you can have a variety of religious people who have their own faiths and beliefs. And when we step into this Neo-Swedenborgianistic arena, we can talk rationally about these things without any faith or belief whatsoever. So we put that aside, and then we can talk about these experiences that people are having, and we can talk specifically about the way these experiences usurp, which is to take over, to dominate a person's worldview. They usurp their worldview. It becomes more real. So without having to believe it is more real, we can observe in the experiencers the experience and the outcome that they have concluded it is more real. And that makes a very interesting point about how we decide and how we live, how we conclude what is the highest reality. And so this is really an arena where everybody is welcome and everybody can analyze this data in the same way. So that's my little introduction, yet another introduction to Neo-Swedenborgianism. Now, oh wow, 15, I guess I have a 15-minute limit on these things, so I might as well talk for 3 more minutes. But because I also want to say that it is very comforting. So the near-death experience, where this idea you're going to be reunited with your loved ones and you're going to see grandma and etc., is a very comforting idea. And some people seem to think because it is comforting, it is invalid. And that is a non sequitur. It is comforting whether it is really real or whether it is only perceived as really real. And so there's a real comforting quality to this idea that life at the end of it has this beautiful reunion, this visceral meaning you feel it in your body, this hyper real reunion and being bathed in love and acceptance and warmth and beauty. And so that, as I see it, is a part of life. Because another thing people say is, well, they're not really dead. They weren't really dead. Well, yes, I agree. They weren't really dead, and therefore this experience is a part of life. So there is a part of life at the end of life wherein you are bathed in love and reunited with everyone you love, and you are welcomed into a beautiful reality, which completely alters your entire outlook on life. And that altering of the outlook of life can happen just by reading about them, just by thinking about them, just by discussing them. You don't actually have to die. You don't actually have to go there. You can look into these things and see it as a part of your own physiology. That's why there's so many similarities, is because it's a physiological process within the human body. And being human, we all have the potential to experience this. Whether it is really real or not becomes a matter of faith or belief. And so that is outside the purview of Neo-Swedenborgianism. We can study what there is to study and leave the faith and belief to other people who would be religious people. So this is not a religion. It is not a faith or belief. It is a rational analysis of this experience, which is this phenomena which is happening at the end of life. All right. Thanks. See ya.